not be moved. Go and tell your senator that we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Go and tell the president that we shall not be moved.
Ladies, you all look great. Can I get y'all to smile for the camera? Tell you what, you all look like fish in water right now. It's beautiful, it really is.
So first off, my name is Abel Tomlinson. I'm with the Arkansas Nonviolence Alliance. Thank you so much for being here, you awesome people. This is inspiring and hopeful in a world filled with war and threats of war. It's beautiful to see people standing up for peace. Peace is such an important issue that isn't focused on as much as it should be. But that's what we're doing here today. So we're going to get this started. First off, we're going to have a song by Still on the Hill.
All right, thank you, Abel. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is beautiful. This is great. You know, we're going to play a song that Donna wrote quite a few years ago about the escalation of warfare in our culture. And you know, it just reminded me how pertinent this is. Just a couple days ago, I heard on the radio that Trump has got a new term for us. It's called the Space Force. Have you heard of that? We now have a Space Force. Well, apparently that's in the plan, so maybe not. I hope. But and then we're going to round this up with, we're going to need everybody's help, because a long time ago, you know this great piece of work over here called the Peace Sphere? Don and I had the great pleasure of actually getting to go inside of that thing before it was brought here. Hank called us up, and we got inside there, and we played songs in there for a couple hours, and lo and behold, we came up with a kind of a chant with the words that are written on that in every language, which is, may peace prevail on earth. And so it's when we finish our song called Up the Ante, we'll kind of wind into that, because we wanted to end on a more positive note.
So we'll have you all join us when it's time to do that.
All right. Now here this is called Up the Ante. Donna's going to play the snare drum for the first time. Well, back in prehistoric days, folks were simple, lived in caves, fought with sticks and stones and staves, and then they made the spear. But the spear was only good up close, and soon they learned to make a bow, an arrow that could kill their foe from a distance. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. They laid the bow and arrow down when black powder came to town. Now the best weapon around was called the matchlock handgun. With the handguns, they were rather crude, and mankind, being ever shrewd, wasn't long for it turned into a Winchester rifle. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more. Maxim's gun sprang to life. He could fire many rounds, bring 100 soldiers down. But gunfire and hand grenades made way for submarines and planes. And in World War II, the armored tanks rolled through. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, 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 more. And then we made the atom bomb, got to see the bloody dawn when we dropped that weapon on the folks of Hiroshima. Today we've got a bomb that's smart. We've turned the act of war to art. Unmanned drones can hit their mark from far across the ocean. And then there's weapons up in space that can end the whole human race. And if that's how it is, nobody wins. It's up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. More, more, more. Now here we go now. Luckily, because of Hank Kaminsky over there, we have this great piece of work in Fayetteville that reminds us that peace is a possibility. And this is very simple. This is a chant we wrote inside there, and it just has the words, may peace prevail on earth. And this is how it goes, and y'all can jump in there. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. Go. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. Give it a try. Here we go. May peace prevail on earth. Thank you all. Peace. Thank you.
Oh, my paper's falling apart here. Next up, we have Reverend Dr. Clint Schneckloff of Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. Clint earned his doctorate of ministry at Fuller Theological Seminary and his Master's of Divinity at Luther Seminary. He now serves as adjunct faculty at Fuller. Clint is also the author of Mediating Faith, Faith Formation in a Transmedia Era. Please give it up for Clint, Reverend Clint.
Wow, okay, so this is a great group, holy cow. You give yourselves a huge round of applause. I came down Dixon and there was all the dancing and the art and people were sitting in the bars and they were like, what's that group? Coming up the street, and I was like, that's the back to the land from the land movement coming up the street, just a little bit, right? Anyway, okay, so here's, I was thinking about why isn't the church that I'm a part of, the Christian church, known for peace? Like, why is that? That hurts to even have to ask that question, right? Because it's like, wow, okay. And so part of the work of my tradition, part of my work, standing with a group like yourselves, is, I think, starts with saying something like this: I'm sorry. We haven't gotten this right a lot of the time. Now, I grew up in rural Iowa, and so I was at the right age where we were trained when we were in elementary school in what you were supposed to do if there was a nuclear attack, which was some version of stop, drop, and roll in a school with a bunch of other elementary kids, hide under your desk. But just like maybe 20 miles away was Arsenal Island. And if you aren't familiar with Arsenal Island, it's an island in the Mississippi River. It's a huge armament manufacturing location. And it was like 12th on the list of places for the USSR to strike. And they had a ranking of what they would hit if they attacked the United States mainland with nuclear missiles. So I grew up going to school being told that you could hide from bombs being dropped on you, but then I would go home and my dad would basically be like, you know, if we get a nuclear strike, just plan on being dead because we're this close to this. It was kind of a relief, actually. Like, I don't really want to survive a nuclear attack personally. So I kind of went through that. And then I would go to church, and I grew up in a church that I can't remember ever mentioning war in the sermons, nuclear armaments, and what we might do. It was this kind, I knew there was a subculture around that was concerned about it, but mostly we were just focused on like personal piety and what Jesus meant for you, right? And sometimes what it meant for the local Christian community and how they ought to be nice to each other. So I was raised in this kind of tradition, and if there was any kind of violence discussed at all, unfortunately what was discussed in church was the violence that was perpetrated upon Jesus so that we could all be saved from our sins and go to heaven when we die. That's the violence that was talked about in my church. Somehow ignoring or putting low in terms of the overall discourse, the reality that the reason why Jesus Christ died on a cross is because the empire could not stand his message and voice and life, and so they killed him violently with the mechanism of that day, right? I mean, because the problem is if you preach that, if you actually think that Christianity was killed on a cross in Christ because of its opposition to empire, preach that, you might end up on such a cross. So part of my apology is basically just saying like, okay, I'm sorry that we haven't centered this. But another part of my apology is I don't actually think that just feeling guilty is very helpful ultimately. Repentance is about change, doing something different, right? And that's what real repentance is. It's not like, oh, I feel so bad that I just did that terribly, but rather, okay, yes, we got that wrong, let's do it better. And one of my deepest beliefs is there's this logical fallacy that's around that we need to fix. It comes from the Latin. It's this thing, the abusus non tollit proprium usus. You all know this Latin phrase, right? Come on, you got to know this phrase. From here on out, you need to know this phrase. Abusus non tollit proprium usus. The abuse of something does not disallow its appropriate use. So just because millions of Americans get Christianity wrong doesn't mean that Christ or the faith or the Christian faith is wrong. It just means it's been corrupted or twisted. And there's a proper way to think it and do it and live it. And here's the big deal. Who are your neighbors?
Christians.
A whole bunch of Christians, right? Look at, I mean, I don't know how many of you are, but your neighbors are. Mark and Nicole, I saw you both here, right? If you win the election, you're going to win it because Christians voted for you, right? I mean, this is going to be the way it is, just numerically. So what you have as an opportunity, what I have as an opportunity, is to try to make sense of this thing that we care about so much, which is that we might think about the right ways to make for peace. That we would focus on peacemaking and make sense of it in the language and the way of thinking that makes sense to your neighbors. Invite them to consider that Jesus lived and walked the way of peace. Whatever we were just doing on the street, coming on up here, that's a lot like Jesus, who walked around, right? Who actively made for peace, dressed a little bit different, actually was commissioned by a guy who dressed a lot different, John the Baptist, right? Kind of like we got Steve Holtz over here. John the Baptist. Do you eat locusts and wild honey, Steve? Because, I mean, you know, right? I mean, so I guess my invitation is let's find some creative ways, and I think we can totally do this, for all y'all to connect to Christians in a way that so inspires them that they might want to follow their Lord on the way of peace. On the way of peace. And one of my favorite ways that that's happening right now is, and I'm a part of the New Poor People's campaign, which is made up of people from all kinds of religious perspectives or no religion at all. But what we all agree on is that people of faith believe that what needs to be centered in our national discourse, so that our national discourse is moral, is not middle-class interests, or partisan interests, or military interests, or kleptocratic interests, which is what's currently centering all of our discourse right now, right? And we're not really that interested in spending so much time thinking about an asshole like Donald Trump. What we want to center is the poor. We want to center the poor and their voices. The voices of women. The voices of those who care and are seeking racial reconciliation. And making sense of the group that's here today, we want to center the voices that say, it is absolutely insane and crazy to spend so many billions and trillions of dollars on weapons that are designed to end the world. While spending almost no money at all on things we know that if we spent money on them, they would make for peace. Right? So I'm sorry. And now that I said I'm sorry, let's do this.
Thank you, Reverend Clint. That was awesome. Give it up for Clint one more time. Next up, we have Geshe Thupten Dorji. He's a University of Arkansas instructor, I believe, on Buddhist philosophy and nonviolence. Also, he's a Buddhist monk, and he's currently the only Tibetan holding Geshe Larampa, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Geshe Larampa degree, the highest Tibetan Buddhist doctorate, equivalent to the Doctor of Philosophy, who is a full-time professor at an American university. He's also the founder of Tibetan Cultural Institute of Arkansas. Please give it up for Geshe Dorje.
Hello, guys. Hello. I'm not going to hold you a lot of your time. What else is not going to wait you? I wrote here a little bit about today's speech. I'm going to read through them and then I will talk about that. What is the peace and calm and nonviolence? Calm and peace and nonviolence is opposite of agitation, irritation, which is discontentment with regard to one's own environment and possessions. However, when we speaking calming state of mind and peace of mind, nonviolence, we should not confuse that wish with completely insensitive, apathetic state, in which there is no feeling. That is not what we mean by having calm and peace state of mind. Genuine peace in the mind is rooted in affection and compassion. Of course, developing this kind of compassion, love is not easy at all. As we start, let us to consider following facts. Whether people are beautiful, people are beautiful or friendly or attractive or unattractive or disruptive, ultimately they're all human beings just like ourselves. Like one said, they want happy, do not want suffering. Furthermore, they are to overcome suffering, to be happy, same as in ourselves. When we recognize that all beings are equal in both their desired happiness and their right to be obtained peace and harmony, you automatically feel empathy and closeness for them. Through accustoming your mind to this sense of a universal altruism, you develop feeling of responsibility for others, which then overcome suffering and difficulty in their life. As long as they are human beings, experience pleasure, pain, just like we do, there is no logical base on discrimination between them versus ourselves. Let me emphasize that it is within your power, giving patience, tolerance, time, energies to develop kindness for others. In a quote from one of the greatest Indian master, Nonviolence, whatever befalls me, befalls me. I shall not disturb my mental joy, peace, and harmony for having been made unhappy. I shall not accomplish what I wish, and my virtue will decline. That's all about peace and harmony that exists within ourselves. It's not lip service. It's a practical level. Doesn't matter what your background. Doesn't matter you're Buddhist or a Christian or believer or non-believer. Everybody deserves to be having peace, harmony, joyful life as ourselves. All of these things are, you have to understanding, basic, fundamental understanding known as equanimity meditation. Equanimity meditation means we must develop non-discriminated thought of anybody, everybody surround you, whether they look like you or whether they not look like you, whether they are motorists or whether they are a peace-loving person. You cannot discriminate one versus others. Discrimination is fundamental ground to develop eventually hatred, angry toward others and yourself. So therefore, it's very important to develop genuine sense of compassion, love, respecting others. If you do so, the person is one step close to you. The person, the stranger, can become a lifelong friend. A bitter enemy can become a friend a lifelong. So peace, harmony that exists within ourselves. Please cherish ourselves. We own it ourselves. Nobody give it to us. We have to develop. Thank you.
One more time for Geshe. We have Professor Martha Beck. Martha Beck is a professor at Lyon College, and she specializes in the legacy of ancient Greek civilization in the era of globalization, including Greek culture, Greek goddesses, and feminist thought. She's published 12 books and 44 book chapters. I think she's a member of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Coalition as well. And I'm especially honored to have her here because she has knowledge about the Olympics, the Olympic truce, and democracy, which is part of the reason this is happening because actually 128 peace organizations have called for action during the Olympic truce. This is a moment of peace in the Korean Peninsula. The United States' war games and the mock invasions going on around Korea, the threats of fire and fury have subsided. And so she can tell us more about this. Give it up for Martha Beck.
I think everyone knows that the truce began when a man with a torch started running through Greece, and they sent the message. The torch represents the light of wisdom. All other moral virtues and intellectual virtues have to be cultivated so that at a critical moment, a person, the light of the mind will turn on, a person will do the right thing for the right reason at that critical moment and be able to convince others to do it. Everybody says they love virtue, they have good opinions, but in a critical moment, their sacred passions tend to turn into obsessions, and they go from creative to destructive. So the torchbearer comes in, when he gets to Olympia, the tradition of the Olympic Games was to figure out an alternative to war, or how to prevent war. So every city-state needed strong young men in case they got invaded. So instead of having a military school where kids learned how to stand up for your country, blind patriotism, state religion, they decided that the city-states would come together, they would collectively create a body of laws and institutions. That's how they would get strong young men is they would compete in athletic contests. And while they're competing, they're forming friendship bonds. They identify with each other, they have empathy, so they understand their common humanity. And that would be the way to prevent war. Okay, so the torchbearer, there's a male and female for each of these. The female is Hestia. So when he gets to Olympia, she's standing at the front gate. She's the goddess of the hearth. Every household has this hearth where they sit around and they talk, they reflect. This is how the light of the mind gets cultivated. This is what children should inherit from their parents. So they talk about their day. They remember what happened or what they read. They recollect so that they collect it together in some meaningful way. They recognize cause-effect connections. And then they talk about mindfulness. Which was the mindful? Who acted most mindfully? And again, this prepares them for adulthood so that they can synthesize all of these capacities. Then, when you look at the site, I've spent many summers there, so there's a building for the priests. This is sacred turf. These are the powers the God gave us, and they expect us to create these communities of self-governing, flourishing citizens, that we work together as citizens to flourish ourselves and to allow each other to flourish. Then there's a huge temple to Zeus. Zeus is the god of justice. A just city is one where all types of authority, parents, authority over children, friends, social groups, professional life, and political life. Whenever you have some expertise somebody else needs, a just city, you always use it for the well-being of the people who need it. You never use it in a way that exploits people for glory, power, or wealth. That's a just city. Then there's a huge column to Hera, the wife of Zeus. She honors people for cultivating various kinds of flourishing over and above whatever the laws could require. So the kind of physical fitness, physical excellence demonstrated at the Olympics is something that's honorable, but you can't mandate it legally. Then you have Apollo, the god of reason, is the one who makes the laws. So, and is detached. So you decide who wins and who loses and who follows the rules. You can't favor your family, you can't favor your city-state. You have to learn to think like a citizen living under common laws. The judges are exercising this when they apply the laws to situations, and then if they cheat, when a judge gets a bribe, the penalties are severe, because if there's no international law, there's no end to war. It's just one war after another. So then, when an athlete cheated, he got his name engraved on stone and left at the site. So this would be his legacy. And Hades always reminds you, leave a legacy behind for the next generation. If he actually succeeded by merit, then he would go back to his city-state and get his name engraved and be a part of that legacy. Also, it was based on merit. So you didn't have to belong to the privileged class. If you had talent, the city would pay for you to develop that talent and represent your city-state. Then his sister was Artemis, the goddess of the wilderness. So Apollo, the god of the city, has to be balanced with the wilderness. The running track has Demeter, site to Demeter. She's the goddess of fertility. There's this integration of nature and culture. There was also a contest in music. So you had to balance physical excellence with emotional excellence that you cultivate through music. And there was a contest for readings of Homer. Homer was the one that's trying to give moral lessons. Now, all those horrible stories you hear about the Greek gods and the Homeric, all of those are about when a sacred passion becomes an obsession, when it goes from creative to destructive. So these are all cautionary tales. Flush this out. Don't do this. Avoid this. So they're not teaching you to do it. They're teaching you, this is how you're going to feel. Don't do it. So as a representative of the board of the Arkansas Coalition of Peace and Justice. We try to get together organizations that are dedicated to all sorts of activities that promote human flourishing. We try to honor them. We try to promote a more just society. So if anybody wants to join our coalition, we will support you financially. We will also come to your events, and we will coordinate, maybe collaborate on some events. And at this moment in history, Plato told about how the Olympics was 800 BC, so the great democracy of Athens didn't jump full-blown from the forehead of Solon. It was established for centuries before. Plato tells a story about, in 30 years, Athens went from defeating the Persians in a golden age to corrupting every sector of society, collapsing, and then electing a man in the name of a return to traditional family values and traditional religion and traditional loyalty, that he was going to make Athens great again. This was Plato's uncle. Plato's uncle Solon actually wrote the Constitution, so yeah. Anyway, so he got elected. His name was Critias. He instantly abolished all respect for law when the whole foundation of Athens was the rule of law, a constitutional government. And after 9 months, they recovered. So at this moment in history, we were given that legacy. We have to apply it differently. Obviously, I'm a woman philosopher. It's gotten changed in how it applies. But I think the legacy is worth remembering and trying to carry on to the next generation. It's under threat. And this is what we have to work on. We have to recover, and then we have to maintain, and then we have to pass on this vision of a flourishing society that promotes human flourishing. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Martha Beck. And I want to especially thank her. She drove hours across Arkansas from Batesville. We also have other members of the Peace and Justice Coalition that drove from Little Rock. We also have members of the Poor People's Campaign that came from Little Rock as well. And we also have a speaker that came from Tulsa. So I'm really thankful that people traveled that far. Also, Food Not Bombs wanted me to remind people that they have coffee and other snacks or food over here, if anybody wants to. We also have mint water over here. There's also things, flyers and things, sign up sheets. Please sign up before you leave so you might be notified of future events like this. I would like to give a couple words, if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay. Woo! I wasn't sure, if it's going to rain, but it looks like it's holding off. So, this speech is called Mother Earth and Humankind Demand Peace. We're gathered here today to call out for peace. Our war culture and war economy must end. We're rightly disgusted at children being killed in our schools. Should we not be equally disgusted by thousands upon thousands of school kids being killed by civilized bombs and nuclear warheads? Cold, impersonal statistics of millions killed often don't trigger the appropriate emotional response. So let me repeat just one tragedy from a Hibakusha, a survivor of the only nuclear bombing of citizens full of civilians. And if anyone's sensitive here to really strong words, you might want to plug your ears. This is powerful testimony, and I spoke this at OMNI's Hiroshima Nagasaki event before, but I think it deserves repeating because our media infantilizes us. They treat us like infants. They censor us. They don't show us the true reality of war. If people saw the true reality of war, it would be over tomorrow. I promise you. This is a testimony of Michiko Kodama. And we're talking about school children dying in America. Let's really dig deeper. Let's go deeper on this. She said, I was 7 years old. I was a second grader inside the wooden school building. Suddenly, I felt a blinding flash, and then the ceiling collapsed and sharp splinters flew all around. They stuck into the walls, the desks, and the floor, and also into my skin. My father managed to find me, and as he carried me home, I witnessed hell on earth. I saw a man with his skin burned heavily and peeling. A mother was carrying a baby which looked like charcoal. She herself was heavily burned all over her body and trying to flee, almost crawling on the ground. Others lost their sight. Their eyeballs popped out or ran around holding their protruding intestines. People tried to cling on to us, saying, "Give me water, water, water." Unable to give help, we just left them there and hurried home. My favorite cousin, who was like a big sister to me, had her face, her entire back, and her right leg severely burned. Her burns quickly festered and flies swarmed. Soon maggots bred and crawled all over her body. All I could do for my beloved cousin was pick these maggots out and wipe her oozing body. After 3 days, she died in my arms. She was 14. So we must extend that feeling of disgust we have for school kids being killed here to include all school kids all over the world and people everywhere, all people of all ages. We must realize that nuclear bombs are built to destroy entire cities, killing thousands or millions of school kids. War and nuclear bombs must no longer be an option. Diplomacy and talking is the only option. Threats of war and nuclear fire and fury must also be seen as disgusting. Disgusting. This issue of peace encompasses most all other issues. And it is perhaps the gravest injustice of all. When we speak of justice, we must speak of this injustice. The brutal inhumanity by all sides is the norm. Not just mass killing of soldiers and civilians, and actually since World War II, more civilians die than soldiers. In every war, Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, more women, children. We talk about women's rights and violence against women. Women and children are dying in these wars more than the soldiers are dying. It's not right. And we also must realize that in the state of war, sexual assault is rampant. You care about sexual assault, you have to oppose war. That's where so many rapes happen. To wage war, armies and the general public must develop some degree of racism toward the enemy. The people that are supposed to be killed, they must be dehumanized. We don't bomb cities full of humans. We only kill savages. We only kill, and excuse these words, but these are the words that they tell people to dehumanize, so I have to repeat them. They're not my words. We have to only kill savages, or chinks, or gooks, or Japs, etc., etc. In the Middle East, it's now, and I've heard some soldiers say this to me, we're killing towel heads and sand, I won't even say the N-word because it's so damn offensive. We're killing sand chiggers, that's what they say. So they talk about turning into a glass factory. Some people support nuking the Middle East. Beyond these injustices, we must also make the environmental connection. Primarily, only two things in human power threaten to destroy our entire planet and species: nuclear war and environmental destruction. The U.S. military is the world's single largest institutional source of CO2 that causes global warming, yet is exempt from every climate agreement, including the much-hyped Paris Agreement. Peace activist Sarah Flounders, an author, she wrote, "Any talk of climate change, which does not include the military, is nothing but hot air." Beyond that, we must look at the environmental and economic trade-off of war. We spend over $1 trillion a year on war and militarism. And they say it's $700 billion a year, but there's all these black budgets. It's over $1 trillion a year. And a supermajority of Congress just passed, of both parties, a supermajority of both parties, a minority of 67 Democrats opposed it, to vote for a war budget for Trump that was bigger than the budget Trump requested. Think about that. A supermajority of even Democrats, and take down their names and go give money to that minority of 67 that voted no. We talk about resisting Trump, and this guy's threatening nuclear war, and you're going to give him a budget that's bigger than he requested? It's unacceptable.
Pointing that out.
Okay, I'm done with that point. I'm almost done. So we're going to spend over $1 trillion a year on war and militarism. Now $5.5 trillion, this is the conservative Wall Street Journal, $5.6 trillion on the Middle East wars, $5.6 trillion, and now $1.2 trillion on new nuclear weapons. And that's a violation of treaties that we're a part of. We signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that says we're supposed to disarm in good faith. We are violating that treaty. And I hate to say this, but this new nuclear arms race didn't start with Trump. He's continuing and expanding it, so keep that in mind. And I'm nonpartisan, so if I have to tell you my position, but oh well, we won't go there. A fraction of that cost could transform our society into a clean energy peace economy. A clean energy peace economy. And not to mention all the other things the Poor People's Campaign will be speaking about later. In this age of nuclear weapons and climate change, we no longer have the option of more war. We've run out of wiggle room. It's either peaceful, interdependent societal evolution or mutual destruction. That's our choice. Planet Earth demands a peace economy. Mother Earth demands a culture of peace. And Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the original Mother's Day proclamation, and this was on our flyers in a kind of a different way, she said, "Arise, women with hearts." And I would say, to include everyone, arise, people with hearts. And Julia Ward Howe said, disarm, disarm. We must disarm Mother Earth, not just assault rifles, but also governments with nuclear warheads that endanger all of us. Peace is the answer. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome up, thank you. Now I'd like to welcome up Jory Costello. She's going to give us a song. Thank you.
That was intense. Thank you. We're all here for the same reasons. Thank you. My shirt says, make art, not war. Make love, not war. Make music, not war. Make families, not war. Make happiness, not war. We're creative individuals. We can figure out how to live in peace. We sing our songs of sun, of rain. Try to convince a world in pain that we are starving for our lives, that we are sick and terrified. We get bogged down by the deadlines, by the confines of the mind. The joker's wild and running free, playing tricks on the eyes. We are consumed by violent rage. Time to arise to a new age. To a new age. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. Let the pendulum swing. It's a long time. It's a long time, long time. It's a long time coming. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Let the pendulum swing. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. We work the land, we pull our weight. Try to live our love, learn not to hate. Drawing outside the lines of time, shifting into a new paradigm. Allow and align. The only way to rise above our selfish ego fit like a glove is learn to forgive, let go and let love, and let freedom ring. Let the pendulum swing. It's a long time. It's a long time, long time. It's a long time coming. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Let the pendulum swing, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring.
Give it up once more for Jory Costello.
We got troubles in the world, and to tell you the truth, we've been losing. All the obstacles before us loom like dark and endless forests, so we opt to take the easy way, let ourselves be led astray, and help to turn production gears that swirl and spin around us, as if doomed to do the work of those whose narrow vision brought this fate upon us. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over. 'Cause the ones who would do evil are so few and far between, they will not matter. They'll be swallowed into brightness by a sea of joyous masses, forced to stand aside and join us with no enemy among us, when all nations work as one and the rescue has begun of our endangered planet. Our survival does demand it, and we'll listen, because it doesn't have to be that way. We'll just wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over and over and over. My friend, is still blowing in the wind, more like a storm. Yeah, it's true, the task is dawning. So much suffering, so much wanting, so much damage has been done by the dollar and the gun. But in the task that looms before us lies the answer we are searching for. It's in the work of mankind, and there's plenty of that work for us to do. Yeah, we can have our cake and eat it too. Yeah, it's true, mankind must work, but that work can have a purpose. We can set upon the daunting task of fixing what is broken. We'll rewire the world with power grids that don't destroy the earth, bring an end to war and hunger, and pay workers what they're worth. And the awesome power of doing good will be loosed upon the world, touching every man and woman, touching every boy and girl. And there won't be need for songs that paint the failure of mankind, 'cause a new song will be ringing in the freedom of our mind. 'Cause it doesn't have to be that way. We'll just wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Because it doesn't have to be this way. No, it doesn't have to be this way.